Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Superficial. We are chiropractors and functional medicine practitioners at Synapse Center for Health and Healing, located in Eagan, Minnesota. Information shared in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any medical conditions. Please consult with a primary care provider before engaging in any new activity or protocol. With that in mind, let's dive into this episode.
All right, well, hello everyone. This is Synapse Beyond the Superficial. My name is Dr. Amber Janetsky. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
I am Jenica O'Sullivan, a health coach here at Synapse.
And I'm Ellie Samborski, the trauma practitioner and somatic coach at Synapse.
Yeah, I guess I didn't say what I do. I'm a chiropractor. I also do functional neurology and acupuncture here and functional medicine here at the clinic. So we're glad that you're joining us. Today we are going to be talking about goals. So the reason why we're doing this topic is because next week we're going to be starting a series that we're going to be challenging our listeners to make some healthy changes in their lifestyle and their daily habits. Anything from sleep to eating vegetables. And so we thought just prefacing that with a topic on goals and how to set them, what gets in the way of goals, what areas of the brain are affected with goals, and then ways to make goals more attainable. Would be a great topic to kind of start with. Mm-hmm. So awesome. So first of all, I love this topic because I love setting goals. Yeah. Mm-hmm. A good reference if you're looking for one, I use the book, The 5 book, literally the letter 5. You can find it on Amazon. But it has you just kind of examine kind of your life goals, and when you write them down, and I've done this and I've looked back like a year later and maybe I've even forgotten what I've written down, and amazingly they've been accomplished. And so it's just really cool when you actually just put some mental energy into it, what comes from it. And even being a little daring with what you write down too, I don't think I can accomplish this. Well, just write it down. You never know. Of course you can. So I'm just passionate about this topic. I love it. So I'm just going to give a general definition of a goal. This one comes from Elliot Berkman. A goal is any desired outcome that wouldn't otherwise happen without some kind of intervention. In other words, a goal is a detour from the path of least resistance. So a goal can be simple. It can be simple and novel. So novel is something new. The brain loves new, so it's good to do these things. Or it can be complex and novel. So you can go, I have a goal of going to the grocery store and getting my groceries, or I have a goal of getting my degree, so there's different levels of complexity there. Yeah. But starting something new is hard because it takes energy. It takes energy in the brain to change the neural pathways. It takes energy in the brain to inhibit old pathways. It takes energy to create new muscle memory of actually doing the task. And so it is hard, and that's why we're talking about it today. Just hey, can we identify ways it's hard and shed light on it and talk about how we can maybe make it easier. All right, so cool. Yeah. So I'm just going to go in. Ellie, why don't you go and talk a little bit about what you notice with your patients and things like that, with what kind of gets in the way of someone from achieving their goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with I do a lot of nervous system regulating work, and so it's really meeting the person where they're at, and that can be different states. There's so much talk about fight or flight. People talk about it all the time I just have so much energy, I'm doing all these things, and I'm spinning in so many directions. And so that takes one kind of approach, right? Your body's really overwhelmed, and so even setting a goal or thinking beyond what's in front of me and putting that fire out is already really challenging. One thing that I don't think we get enough attention of is the freeze response, which is I've been fighting and fleeing for so much. I've been stuck in this response. Now my body's shutting down, and it no longer has the motivation or the drive to keep moving forward. I am now in survival. Something that I show clients often is kind of pushing my hands together, where as I'm pushing them internally or between my hands, I can feel a lot of pressure, right? But on the outside, everything is still, nothing's moving. And that can be very much like the freeze response of I have all of these things and ideas and things that I'm trying to figure out or sort through, or my mind is going a million miles, but I'm not actually going anywhere. And so how challenging it is to create any goals from that standpoint. And that could be either there's real stressors that are coming in and we're just trying to get through them, or it could be trauma, right? This cycle of so many stressors that are just kind of in the background now playing a running tape about who we are, what we can accomplish, and what kind of support we have. And so when we kind of combine those two, just really helping people recognize what's a barrier, and getting that out of the way, right? So if it's trauma, how can we kind of let your body offset some of that? So that running tape or that loop that's always on, how can we quiet it down? How can we release some of that? If it's stressors, how can we shift some of that mindset where we're actually playing like the victim, where life is just happening to me, right? I have no control. I can't do it. I can't fix it. When in reality, God's given us a lot more control than we think. And so part of that is recognizing, when we are setting goals, it can feel like a lot of things because the goal is there's something we want to meet, right? I want to get married. I want to start this job. I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to get rid of my heavy metals in my body. That can feel really overwhelming when we're already overwhelmed. And so it can be really shifting the perspective of, okay, instead of seeing it as this mountain and this huge hurdle and all the obstacles, how can we actually see it from the other side? Who do you want to be? Once we're done with this hurdle, what's at the end of it? And really starting to explore and play in that area. Because often what I see with people is even desiring that part. If there's trauma, it automatically in your brain, you think of disappointment. Negative. Well, I wanted that in the past, right? And it led to disappointment. So every time I even think about it, I don't want to go there. I don't want to be a disappointment. I don't want to disappoint others. And so really breaking that stronghold or that mental block for people and helping them convert that into, no, desire is really great. It's God-given. That's how we actually produce a lot of things and accomplish a lot. And so how can we start with desire instead of just jumping into disappointment right away?
So I love that you bring this up because I'm sure you guys have experienced this too, but when I was younger, and I'll have to say pre-kids, I was great at being a creative thinker. And that's because I was more often in my parasympathetic nervous system, and I had that energy left over to be creative with my thoughts. I wasn't in survival mode. And so what you're talking about is so great, because if we can get our bodies changing that internal environment, changing how our brain is working to get into that parasympathetic range, that creative thinking just really starts to pop up. And I know post kids, not sleeping, all of that, definitely in survival mode oftentimes. Just having that time to take a breath and breathe and spending some time in meditation or prayer is so great, just to have that creative energy kind of like be able to flow again. So,
and capacity kind of thing. I talk about that a lot too with my patients and for myself. Like I'm a bit like I just don't have the capacity for it right now. Like it's just one thing too much. And kind of getting into the excuses and things like that, instead of looking at the bigger picture, the bigger vision, kind of like you mentioned at the end, and using positive psychology on myself. Really, like I just need to take a break. I need to step away from this big, overwhelming, like I'm overflowing cup kind of thing, to taking a step back, whether that's like a walk or read my book or listen to a song. I'll blast a song in my kitchen kind of moment to get myself out of this.
Move. We'll talk about why that would be good later.
Yes, exactly. And what I can to kind of break that pattern, just like you said, there's strategies to do that. And first it's identifying it, just like you said, being aware of kind of where you're at in that process. Are things too overwhelming right now? Is it too much? And then acknowledging how do I get past that hump, that hurdle, just like you mentioned.
Because if you don't see it, you can't get past it.
Exactly.
I mean, sometimes I guess if you move on and then look back retro, like, oh, this is an issue, but it's a lot easier if you actually can call it out and take some steps in to address it.
And I know for myself too, goal setting is not something I'm very good at. I always have these big ambitions to be one. I remember I read the book Girl Wash Your Face, and I had to just look it up because I forgot what the book was a long time ago. And I was like, I'm going to get her journal of like a day. It's like start today or a day in the life or something like that journal. And I remember opening up the first page and it was talking about goals. And I wrote down some goals that were just kind of like in that moment goals that I knew I wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And afterward, after I did the exercise thing, I was like, I did not do that right. It was supposed to be like big picture, like overextend yourself. Like picture something, you mentioned this at the beginning, that like don't limit yourself to just this little box of goals. Like what I can do, lose 10 pounds, you know, what do I want to look at myself? What do I want to see?
What's your legacy?
Yeah.
Big
And we did talk about
questions.
that last week. Like big things, like big house, big, you know, horses in my backyard, you know, things like that you really envision yourself, like envision, like picture, you dream it. This is a dream at the same time, and letting yourself get big with that. And then we can tweak it from there as like you make steps toward that. But what is that? It's an image. It's what you represents your life, living your best life. What is your best life?
Yeah, well, like you said, just envisioning it, taking that time, like I said before, on meditating on it.
Yeah.
Like when you start thinking, like the thought process of the neurological pathway that then leads to emotion and a movement and outcome.
For sure.
And so that's a great place to start. You also start to release those neurochemical, those
Yeah.
little reward systems of like, oh, this feels good when I do this. So starting with envisioning it is a great place. And we'll talk about it again a little bit later though too, when we talk about how to make it easier, but that's one of the things is like meditate on the whys you're doing this and then the outcome too. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah. When I worked with patients too, and for myself, like envisioning your dreams and like that vision, that end goal is really important. Just like you mentioned, and really thinking about who you want to be in general and getting big with that. So like allowing yourself to relax in those moments, be generous with yourself instead of in this state of like anxious or worried and lethargic and all these things like I'm tired, I feel sick, I feel all of these things that are real, but how can I push past that and look at the opposite side? Like what are things that make me feel relaxed? What are things that make me feel happy? What are positive things, because there are positive things to look at for that. And I think when people come even to our clinic and they're not feeling great, they're not at their optimal health, like how do we get there? What does optimal health look like? And that's really the biggest question, like what does optimal health look like toward you to start that goal process? And then starting to generate a list of qualities that you like about yourself, about your best life, about the possible you. Is kind of a good place to start for people to create a list.
Yeah,
first.
and everyone's starting in different places. Like we have some really sick patients here who, goals have to be really small and simple, and that is really big for them.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Totally okay to be there. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
I was going to kind of jump to some of the neuro behind it too, and we're going to keep it kind of vague, but I'd like to talk about like the way towards a goal and just thinking about cognitive control. So we do need to put attention from the frontal lobes on the goal versus being passive. This is something that passive is more brainstem, something like breathing. So obviously we need to have some energy and some production in that frontal lobe to put attention to it. We have to use our working memory. We also have to use inhibitory control. So you're going to be having things come in that are saying, instead of going for a run this morning, I'm going to sit on my sofa and drink my cocoa. You have to inhibit that old pathway that's going to be coming in, because it's been hardwired there for a while. But we can only keep our attention, our focus really on one thing at a time. Like people talk about multitasking, but you really can't with your brain. What you're doing is you're switching from one task to another. And so we can only hold our attention on one thing. And one thing that you'll notice, and this is why like intrinsic motivation is so good for you, is, and then finding that passion behind it too, is because it's so much easier to keep your attention and your focus on something that you really like to do.
Absolutely.
So, that's hard. When next week, we're going to be talking about some healthy habits. And, and some people might say, well, I don't like vegetables. So that might be a harder one. And so we have to look at, like the whys then. Like, well, why am I doing this? And can we make those whys bigger than the nays? And so that's a real part of it. And so we just need to motivate towards that new preferred pathway, we'll call it, versus the old pathway. And we also have to do some planning, so setting like realistic step-by-step. The good thing about it is our brains are made to love routine. So the prefrontal cortex is part of this. After you've done it for a while, the brain wants to find and make that as easy a task as possible. So it's not always going to be hard. It's not going to always be uphill. You know, I don't know exactly, but I think they say about a month of doing a habit. And then after that, like, you have created those nervous system pathways, those reward systems, like, and you've changed things internally, chemically wise, where that you're going to start be going downhill, and it's going to be a lot easier. So just kind of keeping that in mind. Do you guys have anything kind of on that side of it?
Yeah, they do say it takes about 30 days to kind of build that habit, and so hanging in there is really important, and using, I think, knowing the science behind that of why your body's struggling. Like, it's good for myself to know too. Like, I will go through 3 days and be like, that was really good 3 days, or like a week, and then I hit the weekend and it's like, oh gosh, you know, okay, I'll hop back on Monday kind of thing. But
and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Like, if you just get back on. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's important, and where that comes from, and why do we see it go down during the weekend too? There's that side of the brain chemistry of enjoying stuff, and why does that keep happening? Why do I keep developing this pattern and pushing through? Like, that pattern's coming from an area of your body, and how do we break that cycle?
Yep, and that's identifying it, and even maybe writing down a few reasons, like, why was this weekend hard? Like, why, you know, is it because of who I'm hanging out with? Is it because I go to this one place and I get really tempted here? Well, then maybe we need to stay away from those areas or change those habits so you can reach your other goals. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that gets me excited, because even what you were saying with intrinsic motivation intrinsically, right? Once we start to set those goals, it can be really eye-opening to realize, oh, I'm so motivated by what people think or what people expect, or I'm at the mercy of other people's time. And so it can be very empowering to realize, wait, what is my why? Why am I doing this for myself? And what is the barrier, right? If it's other people, if it's other time, other things, again, life happening to me, how can I rewire my brain? Because obviously it's a pattern at this point.
Yep.
I love that.
Because often I hear especially with trauma, I'll hear, I'm never going to get out of this. This is just the way life is. And just instilling that hope of, no, your body's still reacting, but we can rewire your brain, and your body will follow suit. You don't have to keep reliving the same reality. And just, finding yourself and a piece of yourself in all of that can be really, really exciting. And that in of itself is so motivating for me to keep setting goals of, no, this is great. I get to discover myself in the process too.
That's true. Yeah. You don't know what's lying and what you're capable of. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. I know as a fitness instructor, we're taught, and our training is to be a coach. One thing they teach us is not to say, give me 20 more. They teach us to say, give yourself 20, because of that intrinsic motivation is so much stronger.
I love that.
Yes.
So, give yourself 20.
Use that every day. Give myself.
And that makes me think of it. I was at the gym and I was trying to work on a couple of skills, and I remember someone saying, just tell yourself, I love burpees. And I would literally do that, and to this day, I genuinely believe it. I love burpees. And it took me a year, but
wow, I need to try that. Yeah,
I've heard some people say too, like, quitting smoking or quitting a bad habit, just even if you don't believe it, saying, you know, I hate smoking cigarettes. Just saying it every time you pick it up, like, I hate smoking cigarettes. But it starts that kind of brain change and that neurological change. So, cool. Another thing I'm just going to talk about is the will. Like, this is the why, or this is the want, I guess. And this is just part of the dopamine, if I can talk, reward system. And so it's just the drive. And so when we're going to talk about this too, and I guess we can segue there, is just how to make this easier. Like, how can we make reaching your goals easier? Because there are things you can do to set up your nervous system, like you said in the beginning, so where it's easier to reach the goals. And that's one thing I'll say is when you reach some of those goals as you're setting them, is to reward yourself by even saying to yourself, good job, I did it, or writing it down, like, I did this today, and I'm proud of myself for this. Because again, that releases that dopamine in the brain, and it's a reward system. And that actually helps change your brain so it gets easier and easier. So one thing. But I thought maybe now we can talk about other ways that we can make it easier. I know you have a lot to say here. I'll let you kind of get going on it.
Yeah, well, I love what you said about like how can we make these steps easier, give yourself a why, and also know where you're at in that process so that you can celebrate the wins, because celebrating is important. And but we don't know what to celebrate if we don't know if we've reached that point or something that's there. And so when you generate kind of a list of qualities that you want, or you picture this best life and you first envision what that looks like, say it's, as we talked about before, a healthy body to dance at my daughter's wedding, or a healthy body to dance at my own wedding, or something like that. And you see yourself living that way. You literally picture yourself, close your eyes, picturing yourself dancing on that dance floor with your family, your friends, and that's your goal. And you open your eyes and you're clearly not there, right? You may identifying then where you're at the start of this goal. It might be like I'm bedridden. It might be I can only do a few chores in my house energy wise. I feel sick, I feel tired, I feel overwhelmed, I don't have the time to do that, those kind of things. So identifying where you're at is really an important piece. And then starting to identify also then a way that you can prioritize something that you are going to prioritize to get yourself there. So whether that's starting with just getting out of bed a few times up and down the stairs. I've worked with patients and it's just like go downstairs to grab your food and come back upstairs a couple times a day. Sometimes it is as far as just stretching out of your bed. I've had people literally tell me they're stretching in their bed, and I'm like, let's start there. Let's stretch outside of your bed. Let's just take a step outside of your bed. Make a nice comfy, mat on your floor and start there. So or it could be the next step even bigger than that, going actually on a walk to get yourself to that point, because you want to have the endurance or energy or strength to do that.
So you're really breaking down the steps,
Yes.
like making an easier step to reach the big goal, and that's that helps.
Yeah, so kind of people look at it as like a long-term, short-term action steps type of thing, which if you're kind of that concrete person, that's exactly where you get to. But I think there's a lot of importance in your why and this vision that you have for yourself. So even writing down, as you mentioned, writing down your vision, like my life vision, my vision, for myself, this is my vision, this is my goal, this is my dream, and starting there, and now making a plan to do it. So where are you now? Where do you want to be? And then what has to change to get there? Bottom line. So I know change can be hard for people, and I think that is kind of where people get hung up on how do I change, and then how do I know if I've changed? So how do you know when you're being successful? So indicators of success might be for yourself, like if I want better sleep, what does better mean? Or if I want to feel better, what does better look like?
Yeah, being specific.
Yes, yep. For yourself. So that's a monitor right there. So sleeping better means I get to bed earlier and sleep through the night, or I get longer hours of sleep, setting a time, something like that. So really getting specific in those moments, so that you're saying, hey, check that off. I went to bed at 10 every night. Yeah. Things like that, which is kind of just the nature of goal setting, that action step of being specific. So people like SMART goals, which is kind of, again, it's the same thing, but I really like this big vision and then breaking down into steps to get there, so that your end goal is you're dancing at that wedding, you've quit tobacco, you've slept through a night without waking up to go to the bathroom 3 times, without waking up and not falling back asleep, those kind of things. But there's baby steps to get there. So I don't know about you guys when you guys make goals. You guys can speak to this too, but I know I struggle when I make goals of letting people know or telling people what my goals are. And so I'm like working towards something like around my house, around my whole entire family and friends, and nobody knows what's going on or how to support me, or all of a sudden I'm like, well, I didn't get my 5 minutes of whatever today, and my husband's like, I had no idea, what? Like, well, you're doing that every day? Like, of course you're getting that 5 minutes.
So you're getting your team together to support you.
like a team, a system, accountability piece.
Yeah,
So.
and that's where a lot of joining groups or that's where fitness classes, I'll say it again, like are so great for people too, because you're getting together and you're getting that energy and motivation. So joining groups or getting and again being around people who are already maybe at your goal, hanging out with them, letting them influence you, instead of maybe people who are doing the same patterns that you were doing before. That's going to just only encourage the old pathways.
Well, and even knowing that support is kind of the antidote to survival and stress, right? When we're stressed, that's our system saying, hey, this is too much for me, I need some additional support. And so even with our nervous system, the goal, the sweet spot that we all want to be in when we're goal setting is the social engagement state, which is I'm present, I'm engaged, I'm authentic to myself, I can easily connect with others. And so support is so important, because how many goals have we set out of self-hate, and how sustainable are they?
Wow.
Right?
Isn't that amazing when you actually recognize that you're doing that? Like I just caught one the other day. I was like, I was motivated by being worried what someone was going to think of me. And it was a big thing that I had made this decision. And I was just like, that just makes me sick that I cared that much and I made this decision based off that. Like that is silly. And so yeah, when you kind of put some light on it, it can be shocking.
Yeah, or like a comment somebody made and coming home and hearing that in a different way, and basing goals or somebody, how something thinks of you or how you feel that day, making kind of a quick decision that day instead of envisioning something of like, okay, I don't feel good today, yada yada.
Yeah. Or even something as simple as I just don't want to be a burden, right? So I'm going to force myself to go to the gym, or I don't want to be a strain on my family. All these things, all these limiting mindsets that we have about our potential, about who we are, and then we set goals, and then we're struggling to meet them because the why is off.
Right, yeah. So you're saying you're going to the gym because you don't want to be a burden versus I want to be stronger and healthier for myself. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep.
I was going to just piggyback off you with the writing it down too. So research by Dr. Gail Matthews saw that people who wrote things down were 33 to 42% more likely to reach their goals than people who don't write it down. So.
That's probably where my problem is, right there. I tend to, grab a goal in my head, and then I'm like, okay, what, the one thing I'm going to do, write a letter to somebody or write a note to somebody because I want, to build a connection with somebody I'm starting making a connection with or something. And if I don't write it down, and even if it's, like, I could have just texted somebody in that moment something nice, but if I don't write it down, it's kind of like an in-the-moment feeling, and then passes me by.
Yeah.
Tear it off.
And I don't know about you guys, but like my head can swim with things that I have to do for the day. And this kind of can go for goals. Like say I have so many things to do to reach the goal, right? But when I write it down, the steps, and start check marking it off, like what I thought was going to take all day takes me like 10 minutes because I'm like, oh, that didn't take long. Like that took way less. Like and it just helps me focus my attention on number one, then number two, then number three. So much nicer.
Yeah, are there other ways that you guys feel like they're help you set a goal and attain a goal? Or is there a specific goal that you have had that you've been able to achieve, and what did that feel like, and what did that process look like?
Well, this kind of goes against, kind of, I guess. I mean, I've had a couple things. One, I remember I set a goal in chiropractic school and I think a teacher asked us again to write it down. I guess I have two ideas. And mine was I needed to get my children's books published. And so I wrote it down, and it just bugged me. I'm like, I wrote it down, I'm going to do it. And that happened with my functional neurology degree as well. My boss at the time had me write down goals, and I was nervous to write this down. I was like, I am not ready, because I just hadn't studied throughout the year like I wanted to, and I'm like, there's no way I can by the end of the year get my diploma and pass the boards. But I wrote it down, pushing myself, knowing it was a stretch, and I kept going back to that write down. I was like, I wrote it down, I'm gonna do it, and I did it. I don't know how, but
That's amazing.
We did it by the end of the year. So for me, it was that motivator of, I said I was gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. So I don't know.
I love it.
No, that's awesome. I think for me, something that helps is I can't say I do this every year at New Year's, but just going back to the vision of who do I want to be, right? So that I'm not aimlessly just doing all these goals out of insecurity or out of, well, I should and everyone else is doing it. Or again, out of that, just really insecurity. It's going back to the vision of, wait, who am I? What do I want to accomplish? So even writing things like a bucket list is so important because it helps you really identify who are you and once we get there, once that goal is finished, who does that make me now, right? Who does that make me to myself, to my community, to my connection with God? And it expands to such a bigger thing than just this little goal of I want to eat vegetables every day.
Yeah.
Right? And so just keeping that at the forefront is usually a good reminder of even reminding myself, how am I going to feel once this is accomplished? I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym, but I have this competition coming up and I want to feel strong and I want to be on that podium. And so giving my mind that visualization and right, our mind is, when we visualize it, it can actually relive it in our body. It creates that pathway. And so bringing myself there over and over and over again can be really, really motivating because now I'm actually doing it out of sustainable energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There was another, back in the day, because I danced ballet, and when I first started the journey, I was coming from a smaller town. I had no business pursuing a dream of dancing professionally. But I just started taking classes more and more. And sometimes those classes sucked. Like sometimes I felt terrible. But I remember being very clear to myself, like, it's okay. Like, today sucked, but I'm going to go back tomorrow. And I just kept at it. So kind of just pushing through those bad times too. Again, just to reach that bigger picture, knowing that it's going to have some hard days. And that's kind of with the brain chemistry too, of just keeping that why and meditating on that why and keeping that why louder than the nays or the other pathways would be really good. Yeah.
Those are great. I think speaking to both kind of the goals that you both had and how you're reminding yourself too, there are characteristics in both of you that allowed you to be able to reach those goals too. And I really like the BIA Institute on character strengths. So there's the 24 character strengths, and you can go online. It's the BIA Institute on character strengths and take the quiz and find out what your top 5, I think it ranks them all, but like the top 5 are kind of really big ones to focus on, and how you can use your character strengths to help you achieve your goals. So things like bravery, kindness, love of learning, all things that once I learned those, I was like, that makes sense.
It's huge, probably.
Yes, that makes sense. And how can I use that, my bravery to get myself there, my love of learning to get myself there, and then learning also what are not strengths of yours. So what are at the bottom of that list that you might need to push past, and have that accountability and have these things to push past because you don't have, that kindness in you. Maybe that's not a natural thing of yours, and so your goal is to have this relationship with a coworker at work or just more coworkers at work, and you have this kindness that's just hanging in there that just does not shine. Like, how do I overcome that, and how do I use a strength to kind of combat that? So things like that that's a very, very easy example, but it can be as easy attained to any other things, scholarly ones. If you don't have a love of learning, how do I use these other strengths to learn things and to achieve this GPA that I want or this degree that I wish to have? So those are really fun things to know, and just I think people like taking quizzes and learning more about themselves. So it's a nice free quiz to learn about yourselves, and it describes those character strengths. So I could talk much more on that, but it's a quick thing for people to be able to do and learn more about. So
I like that. Yeah. Same. I was going to maybe touch a little bit too on ways to change your brain chemistry.